Hello folks, Alex here. This is Alex Unabridged, and today I've got my wrap up for October's adventures in genre, where October was for oldies, so that's classics. So welcome back to the channel if that is the case. Yes, in fact, might be welcoming a few more people. I've had a little uptick in subscribers over the last week or so. A big welcome to any new subscribers tuning in today. Thank you very much for subscribing and for watching. So yes, October, adventures in genre. I went back a few years, shall we say, to mostly pre-20th century texts to read some classics, because I don't read classics really at all, certainly not classics of sort of literary fiction, I guess. So I thought I would pick 3 by female writers, and so we had one English or British, one from the UK, one from Europe and one from America. So let's dive straight in to what I got through. Okay, first up then was the UK contingent, and that was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, of course. For anyone who's not familiar with Pride and Prejudice, this is set against the backdrop of the early 19th century English society, basically. So we're talking Georgian times, which happens to be one of my favourite periods of British history. Actually, I love that period of history. And the story revolves around Elizabeth Bennet, who is a rather witty and independent young woman, and her navigation through the complex sort of social landscape in her quest to find, actual love and self-discovery. The Bennet family itself has 5 daughters, and it's all about, kind of getting them married to secure their future. So the arrival of a rather wealthy and eligible bachelor, Mr. Bingley, sparks excitement in the family, and the Bennet sisters all want a piece of him. And he becomes enamoured with the eldest daughter, Jane. Elizabeth is the second eldest. But it's Bingley's close friend, Mr. Darcy, who is a bit of an arse, or comes across as a bit of an arse, to start with, who is the one that Elizabeth Bennet is intrigued by, even if she doesn't like him to start with. And so the novel unfolds with a dance of manners, misunderstandings, pride and prejudice, and looks at the social expectations of the time as Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy navigate their feelings, their changing feelings for one another. So yes, it's a classic. It is an absolute classic. Okay, this is a 5 out of 5 for me. I went into this, I knew the story of Pride and Prejudice because I grew up with the 90s miniseries, BBC miniseries, with Jennifer Ailey as Elizabeth Bennet and Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy. And I'd really enjoyed that series, so I knew the story well. I've seen it several times. So I expected to kind of, to at least like the story, like the actual book. I knew I liked the plot and the characters. But I did not think that I would like it this much. Because, as I say, I don't read many classics. I struggle with the language often. I just haven't been able to get into the classics that I've tried, particularly in the past. But yeah, the writing is extremely accessible. It's very easy to get through. It's extremely engaging. Even though there are a lot of bits of them going to dances and balls, or generally sitting around chatting. There's a lot of dialogue. It's very dialogue heavy, which works really well, actually. There's some great snark in there. It's incredibly funny. I had this as an audiobook, which was narrated by Rosamund Pike, which was excellent. Apart from, I would say, the only narration that annoyed me was that of Mrs. Bennet. It was a little bit too high pitched and just irritating. Although she's meant to be irritating, so that's fine. But it grated a little bit. But the majority of the character narration, if you like, was excellent, really outstanding. Mr. Collins in particular, I thought was excellent, and Lady Catherine de Bourgh was fantastic. Yeah, the plot, it moves at a decent pace. It never feels like it drags at any point. It's a character piece through and through, and the characters are really well formed. Certainly the main characters are, and they have strong growth. You know, the Elizabeth Bennet particularly is an outstanding character, and just a joy to read, really. Yeah, the characters, I mean, in terms of how it's read in the narration and how we would read it today, I think it's probably, you know, comes across even more theatrical maybe than it did at the time. But it's highly amusing and touching as well. So yeah, I was, as I say, extremely surprised at how much I enjoyed this. And when my wife realised that I was reading it or listening to it, she was extremely happy because she loves it. It's one of her favourite books of all time. She loves Jane Austen. And immediately she was like, "Oh, when you finished it, can we watch the BBC miniseries again?" And then I was badgered constantly, "Have you finished yet? Have you finished yet?" And when we did finish it, I watched the miniseries again with her. And yeah, that's just a note on the miniseries. That is, I think, a blueprint for how you adapt something like this. It is so well adapted. I can see why no one has really made another miniseries of it since, because you don't mess with perfection. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. I will most definitely be trying some more Austen. Okay then, next up, we took a short hop across the channel with the Scarlet Pimpernel, which was by Baroness Orczy. So the Scarlet Pimpernel is an adventure novel, essentially, set against the backdrop of the French Revolution, and follows the exploits, if you like, of Sir Percy Blakeney, who is a seemingly foppish, kind of useless English aristocrat, really great friends with the Prince Regent. So again, we're in Georgian period in terms of British history and revolutionary France. It's hard to say. So I think we're talking 1790, I think 1794, something like that, 1793 and 94. We're in the Reign of Terror, basically. So yes, it follows Sir Percy Blakeney and his wife. It's a lot of it is from his wife's perspective, or his wife's tale, Lady Marguerite, and she's French. And Sir Percy Blakeney, yes, is a seemingly effete, useless, stupid aristocrat, really. But is secretly, of course, the daring and elusive Scarlet Pimpernel, who is rescuing French aristocrats from the guillotine and smuggling them to safety in England, and comes up with all sorts of like ingenious madcap ways to do this in disguise. But as the revolutionary government of France, led by the cunning Chauvelin, who is a real good villain, becomes increasingly frustrated with the Pimpernel's ability to outsmart them, basically, they seek to unmask him and capture him. And Chauvelin blackmails Marguerite when she becomes sort of entangled in the political intrigue, and cons her essentially into discovering and unveiling the Pimpernel's identity. She then has to try and stop Chauvelin from finding the Pimpernel and capturing him and sending him to the guillotine. So this one is a 4 out of 5. Another good one. The writing of this, the writing of this is extremely theatrical. It's quite melodramatic. In fact, it's very melodramatic. Again, this was an audiobook. I did start to read this as a Kindle Unlimited ebook, but it had the audio with it, and so I was planning on kind of switching between depending on what I was doing. If I was working, I could have the audio one. If I was sitting reading, I could read it. But actually, I only read the first sort of chapter or two as the ebook, and then happened to listen to the next chapter, and then just listened from then on because it was extremely well narrated. And it was read accordingly in terms of its melodrama. It's very over the top. The writing, sometimes it's a little irritating, just because of the nature of the language at the time, certainly in terms of the Regency aristocratic language, certainly in dialogue. There's a lot of laws and faiths, and it's a little bit maybe overdone sometimes, but it was funny enough generally. It was an exciting read. It was very, very funny at times. Another dialogue heavy piece, which again works really well. As I say, the audiobook, for me, this is the way to experience this book. The plot was, again, pacey, intriguing, exciting, tense. Were they going to catch him? Were they not going to catch him? And a few twists and turns, things like that. So yeah, really good pace of plot, lots of nice nice use of settings, really well described settings, so you could kind of picture everything. Characters, again, are very over the top. They are archetypes, really. They are stereotypes in a lot of ways, from the Pimpernel himself, to the kind of the aristocratic ladies, the innkeepers, things like that. They have great names, a lot of the characters, as well as like Mr. Jellyband, who is the proprietor of one of the inns that the Pimpernel kind of uses as a safe space. So yeah, it was just a rip-roaring good fun time, basically. There are more in the series apparently, so I might look those out. But yes, that one is a 4 out of 5. Okay, and then finally we go across the pond to America, and this is with Kate Chopin's The Awakening. The Awakening was I think a groundbreaking novel, which explores the journey of a woman called Edna Pontellier, a woman in late 19th century New Orleans, who undergoes quite a transformative awakening. She's married to Léonce Pontellier, and she grapples with the social expectations of women and the limitations placed on her as a woman, as a wife and a mother. They spend their summer, the family, at Grand Isle, and there she befriends the quite unconventional Robert Lebrun, and Edna begins to question the roles assigned to her by society, as she starts to develop kind of feelings towards Lebrun. When she returns home, she kind of suffers a growing discontentment with the conventional forms of marriage and motherhood and wifely duties. She then starts to pursue her desires and assert her independence. She becomes involved with another man in society, and then Robert again. He goes away for a bit and then comes back. But the societal consequences and her kind of inner conflicts force her to actually confront the fact that this newfound freedom also comes with major limitations. It explores themes of identity, self-discovery, say, consequences of defying societal expectations. Her awakening is liberating and tragic in that respect, as she kind of has to deal with the complexities of her desires, what she wants to be, what she wants for her life, and the norms that confine her, that really restrict her. It's about that tension between individuality and societal expectation for a woman in that era. So this one is a 2.5 out of 5. This one I didn't enjoy as much. It wasn't a slog or anything like that. I just didn't connect to it in the same way as the other two. It's still, there's plenty of dialogue in terms of the writing. It's still it's engaging enough to keep me going on it. So there are some genuinely beautiful sections actually, particularly when Chopin writes about the setting and things like weather and some of Edna's kind of emotional kind of states, I guess. A lot of that is quite poetic. Some of it is very poetic and really evocative, and imbues the piece with real emotion through that writing. So I can really appreciate that. There was some sections, some paragraphs where I really kind of took note because it was really beautifully written. But there's also a lot of telling, not showing, which is noticeable, I think, and it kind of draws you out of it. It pulls you out of it a bit. It becomes a bit kind of a bit monotonous sometimes. Plot-wise, it's not really my taste. I'll say that it's just not really my taste. I think it was interesting. Certainly in terms of the setting, the setup. It was interesting in terms of looking at the society of that time, in the South of America, and as I say, the societal expectations. But yeah, it just I didn't connect as well, I think, with this one. The ending is tragic and it is beautifully written, and I can appreciate that. And it does, in terms of the plot progression, it works. It does exactly what it intends to do, I think. But as I say, it's just not necessarily for me. I didn't particularly connect with any of the characters that much. Although, as I say, they were interesting enough in terms of giving the sense of time and place, and in terms of the accepted behaviours, etc. of the era. I did get a little confused at times on who's who, with all the French names and which madam was which. So I did find it a little bit difficult sometimes to keep track of who was who and what relationship they were to someone else, and all that kind of, sort of societies, the relationships between people in society. That kind of thing I found a little bit difficult sometimes. This was one which I did read, again, partly as ebook, and I also had the audio available with that, so partly as audiobook, which did help with some of the pronunciation. But yeah, it certainly, again, made it easier for me to understand the language through the audiobook, but it didn't necessarily, it didn't make me like it anymore. So 2.5. So that was the only one where I say I didn't dislike it. I didn't actively dislike it. I'm glad I've read it to see, to experience it. But it just didn't do a huge amount for me. So that was those were the 3 that I read then. So classics, would I read more? Austen, absolutely yes. I'm going to read my way eventually through Austen's back catalogue. I know I started with the second of hers, so I will go back and I will read Sense and Sensibility next. And my missus is already badgering for me to read it soon so that we can watch the film with Emma Thompson. Like, we can watch the film first. Again, I've seen the film already. It's not like I'm spoiling it. So I will read that. I may watch the film first, and then I will try and go through in publication order. I think that's probably quite an interesting way to do it, a good way to do it. So yes, I will definitely read some more Austen. I thoroughly enjoyed Pride and Prejudice. Adventure like Scarlet Pimpernel, yes, I would read more of that. I'm going to try some more of the series, potentially, of the Scarlet Pimpernel series. But I think it's time that maybe I start to think about reading some stuff like some Dumas, perhaps, some Three Musketeers, some Count of Monte Cristo, some stuff like that, basically. You know, try some more swashbuckling adventures. So yes, certainly, you know, we'll have a look around and see what I fancy of that, of adventurous literature from that era. Not sure about more stuff like The Awakening. That I'm less interested in. But never say never. If there's something that enough people recommend to me, or something that I just think that sounds really interesting, then I might give it a go. But I'm really glad that I didn't struggle with the language particularly at all in these, because that is what often puts me off classics, is I've found in the past, I found it very difficult. I think audiobooks are the way to go for me with this. I think, you know, certainly the experience of listening to Pride and Prejudice and to the Scarlet Pimpernel, that's what really made the experience so enjoyable. I think that's why I have given those such high marks. I think that's what's really elevated them. And certainly the Scarlet Pimpernel, that was brilliant on audiobook. But yeah, Pride and Prejudice as well, I will listen to the Austens as opposed to just read them. I may read and listen at the same time, but yeah, the audiobooks I think are the way to go with that, because it helps me with the language. It helps me understand the text a lot better, understand the dialogue, understand the way of speaking, etc. So yeah, definitely keep going with the audiobooks on stuff like that. Okie dokes, November's adventures in genre that I'm already in the middle of reading. We are in neo-noir, so dark crime thrillers. Generally crime thrillers that kind of have a detective at the centre of them. So those that I will be reading this month, I've gone on a little trip around parts of the world, and I've gone over to Iceland for some Scandi Noir with Snowblind by Ragnar Jonasson, then up to Scotland for some Tartan Noir with Cold Granite by Stuart McBride, and finally I've gone over to Japan for a crime thriller, because I've never read any Japanese stuff before apart from manga. So I've gone with The Devotion of Suspect X by Kaigo Higashino. So those are the three that I'm reading this month, and obviously the wrap up for that will be out early in December, so we'll see what I make of those. So that is it from me today, folks. Thank you very much for watching, as always. Do let me know what you think of the books I've spoken about today in the comments, and you know, any others you want to recommend to me in terms of this kind of classic literature. Do pop those down below in the comments as well. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving me a like and subscribing for more content coming very soon. But from me, for now, that's ta-ra.